Let me tell you about the Sleep With Me podcast. If you struggle to get a good night's sleep like me, I need you to check out this podcast. Each episode is crafted to help you unwind, featuring gentle storytelling designed to ease your mind and guide you into restful slumber. I kid you not, whenever I'm anxious in bed at night, I turn it on, and before I know it, it's morning, and I'm as refreshed as I've ever been. I am not sure how it works, but trust me when I tell you, it does. So, join me and thousands of others who have turned restless nights into peaceful sleep with the help of the Sleep With Me podcast. Go Global is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. Hello again, beautiful people, and welcome back to a very special episode on the Make Mental podcast. I am joined by a professional wakeboarder from New Zealand. How exciting is that? I think it's the first athlete wakeboarder that we've had, but Brad Smeele was a professional wakeboarder in New Zealand who became a quadriplegic following a pretty life-altering accident in July of 2014 while he was training in Florida. And I won't steal all of his thunder here and tell his entire story, but he tried to attempt a world first double backflip with some sort of rotation. Every time I have a sport I don't know, I don't even dare step into the world of sounding like I'm a judge for the sport. So we'll get into that. But during the stunt, he lost control and he landed headfirst on the ramp and shattered some of the vertebrae in his back, resulting in a complete spinal cord injury. Doctors gave him a 1% to 2% chance of regaining that upper body movement and really no chance of walking again. And before the incident, he was ranked 20th on the U.S. Pro Wakeboard Tour and was known for pushing the sport's limit, earning Trick of the Year in 2014 for the innovative ramp-to-ramp double backflip. Again, that's a mouthful for me to say, so it has to be a mouthful to perform. Super excited to hear more about that. But the accident left him unable to move or feel anything really from the neck down, requiring over an 8-hour intensive surgery. Spent some time in the ICU, battled some fevers, some other health complications. And again, with a accident of that magnitude, it comes with breathing, eating, speaking challenges, and the whole 9 yards. We really appreciate Brad for taking the time to be here with us today and share his story with us. So we're gonna eat up this next hour and learn everything we can from him, from his experience, and really his new outlook on life. So Brad, thank you so much for joining us here on the Make Mental podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Caleb. It's cool. I like how, the wonders of the internet and social media brought us together to be able to have a chat today, and, strangers from other side of the world, and here we are. So
yeah, you're speaking to me from tomorrow. I love that line. Sounds kind of creepy, but we'll see if I can catch up here. But I wanted to kind of start the episode by diving right in, if you're okay with it, unless you want to share a little bit about your story to give the listeners kind of an understanding where you come from before I get into some juicy details.
Yeah, I mean, I could, start off with, I guess, just, the background, coming from New Zealand. My mum was one of New Zealand's top water skiers when she was younger. And so we sort of just water skied as a family and stumbled across wakeboarding. And the first time I tried it, I never water skied again. Just got hooked on it. And that was when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And then by 17, took off to Florida to go and pursue it as a career, and won the Junior World Champs at the end of that year. And then the following year as well, I won Junior Worlds, but in the other federation. So there's two different federations. It had a good start to my career, and then went 10 years back-to-back summers. Had a lot of ups and downs, injuries, financial setbacks and struggles, just because, coming from New Zealand was a battle, because, wakeboarding is a fringe sport as it is. So it's hard to get much funding behind it when you're in such a small country that sells not that many wakeboards and boats and stuff. So so I was always kind of up against it and felt like a bit of an underdog against the people I was competing against. Sort of felt like I had to work for it a lot more than some of the others may have. I always felt like a lot of the guys I was competing against were, sort of given mum and dad's gas card and they grew up on the lake and they got the boat on the end of the dock and that's all they had to worry about. Whereas I never even had a boat. I, had to find places and people to ride with. And so I think, that adversity, even when I landed, I became one of the first in the world to land a 1080. So three full spins in the air, and three legends of the sport had landed it before me and got it on film. And then I did the same. And I was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to get some financial backing now. I'll get some sponsors and stuff like that. But then that was in 2008 when the global economy took a massive dump. And so there was no budgets left. And so, like, it was kind of, a year later, I blew my knee. A year after that, I had shoulder surgery. It was, hit after hit just to get back up each time. And then, yeah, just kind of I guess what that taught me over the years. And it was something that I look back on now. And while going through all of those struggles, when you're in it, you hate it. You think there's nothing good about it. But then later down the track, you realize how it's allowed you to grow and, build your resilience, and adversity can be an asset if you let it. So, I didn't realize I would need, that sort of, I guess, preparation for what was to come with my injury. And, yeah, but no, I wasn't a huge, competitor when it came to, the boat contests. I made one sort of top 10, or a couple on tour. I think I got like a fourth or fifth at the US Nationals. And but yeah, my angle, my direction of the sport was pushing the limits. Like the 1080. Doing tricks that not many people or no one had done before. And I even did the world's first water to water step up, and gapped up a spillway. So it's sort of, I think it was about a 30-foot uh, upward sort of jump, and then about 60-foot gap over a concrete spillway that I had to jump over. So that's all on YouTube and stuff. And yeah, I just liked going big and like kind of pushing the limits. And then, sometimes the limits push back. So that's why I loved the mega ramp when that came about, because, I went too big off a double up and I blew my knee out. Because when you're riding behind a boat, as high up as you go up, you come back down. So that's why I liked kind of the bi-level setup, gapping up into a higher level of water, but then behind the boat, yeah, you're limited to that flat plane of the lake. So when the mega ramp came about, I was like, yeah, this is me, man. Like, and I was living at Lake Ronix at the time. Ronix being my board sponsor. They bought a property outside of Florida, outside of Orlando, with two lakes on it, and it became our team training facility. And that's where we had one of only two mega ramps in the world. And so I was living there, managing the property, and had this dream set up in my backyard to ride. And it was all going really well. And I was making moves and kind of peaking, really. Like I felt like winning trick of the year, like after landing that trick. And I knew that I was going to win trick of the year, but by the time the awards came around, I was already in the ICU. But I knew I was going to win that, and I knew that would, most likely get me the attention of the sponsors and actually get me paid. Because by this point I was 27, I'm starting to get old in wakeboard years. I knew I only had probably 5 or 6 more years as a professional. And so I needed something to happen. And that may have been part of the reason I pushed so hard, was I was so tired of living off the smell of an oily rag. And just, yeah, needed to get noticed, and was pushing, and the limits pushed back. So that was coming up almost, it'll be 11 years ago in about a week and a half.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time to kind of set the stage for us. And I know you mentioned towards the end you felt like pushing the limits because you were sick of living off the smell of an oily rag. But I would like to push back there a little bit and say, from the sounds of your career and what I can follow, you've always wanted to push the limits. It didn't matter if you were a newcomer to the sport or if you were 27 looking at the end of your career. Where does this need to kind of defy the boundaries come in for you? What's that about?
I think it was, yeah, it's a little bit of the chip on my shoulder, I think, from the earlier years when I was really focused on competing behind the boat and trying to, be one of the best on the pro tour and stuff like that, and just the struggles that I found with that. I think, yeah, it just made me more and more hungry. It just kind of, yeah, I wasn't when what do they say? You either you win or you learn, and I didn't win very much. So I was learning a lot along the way, and yeah, I think that was one way that I just knew that I could set myself apart because I didn't have what everyone else had in terms of being able to train. Like I even did the sums one year, and I worked out that it would cost me like 35 grand, I think it was, to be able to actually do a season right. Like live right, eat right, train right, like actually get the time on the water that I needed. But I never got that amount of funding to be able to do it. So I was always, you know, so there were some times I'd be like, okay, am I training today? Do I get to ride today, or do I get to eat dinner tonight? It was down to that point where I was like, living off $5 footlongs and whatever cheap deals I could find. And yeah, so I think that was where the hunger came from, was just being that underdog and really, and I think coming from a small country too, just, I was taking on the world and wanted to represent my country well. And yeah, and I think also it probably came from some of the influences that I did have from wakeboarding, some of the early influences. Some of the guys, there was Mark Kenny, a young Australian rider who ended up, I think he died in 2002, 2002, maybe 2003, around there. But he was one of the first like amazing wakeboarders that I got to watch in person. To the point I didn't know what he was doing. I was so uneducated in the sport and got to watch this guy just absolutely charge it. And then he unfortunately passed away, and some of the other influences that I had, they were really those types of guys that would just push hard, kind of push the limits and go big. And that's how I wanted to make wakeboarding look for myself as well.
Sure, yeah. What do you say to the people who look up to you as their wakeboarding influence?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially from where I am now. Uh, like some people might expect me to, you know, give people caution or, things like that around like my injury and what can happen. But it was such a freak thing. I was the first person in professional wakeboarding to have an injury like this. And then there was a second that came a couple of years later. But yeah, there haven't been many situations like mine. And so, I try to, like, if anyone's reaching out and asking for advice and things like that, I would never deter anyone from going for what they want just because there's risks. Like, there are risks everywhere. You don't have to be trying to make a double flip over a mega ramp to risk breaking your neck. Like, I've seen and heard of people that have jumped on their bed the wrong way, tripped and fell, like just the most basic shit. And yeah, so it's not about limiting yourself or being cautious. It's just going hard, going for it. Like, obviously there's mitigating factors you can do. Like, even when I was going for that trick that day that I crashed, I made sure that my teammate Chad was there, who he and I had recently done a CPR course and water safety course, which coincidentally taught us how to stabilize a spinal cord injury in the water. And that was like 2 months before my injury. And we went along and did that. So I made sure that he was going to be there that day because I knew that there was risk involved. I never thought it could be this bad. But yeah, I think it's, do what you can to mitigate things and be safe. Obviously, wearing life jackets and helmets when you're doing gnarly new stuff, and yeah, but just go for it. And I think the other thing is try and be as authentic as you can, and being yourself. It's very easy to look at another rider for inspiration and you're trying to mimic what they do, whereas and that's always great to draw inspiration from people like that. But yeah, find your own niche, find your own style, like do what makes you happy. It doesn't have to be the way that everyone else does it. Yeah, like sometimes you can take the road less traveled, and I saw people throughout my career who did that. They even stopped competing. They're like, okay, I'm just going to do video parts, or I'm just going to go big. Like that's all I'm going to do and be known for. And they get known for it, and they get support, they get backing, and so yeah, being yourself and the best way you can is a big part of it as well.
Yeah, wonderful advice, and I can second. Not obviously to the big ramp capacity, but it hurts falling off a tube when you're going tubing. So I can't even
I mean,
imagine the force from a big jump like that.
besides the major injury, like breaking my neck and blowing my knee and my shoulder, I always got way more injured on a tube than I ever did wakeboarding.
Yeah, it's
And it's
unreal. And
because people just,
also,
it's like a license to drive like a maniac.
yeah, and then they're creating the jumps because they're not set up for us. But I think the most difficult part for me about tubing is keeping the swim trunks on. For some reason, when I fall off, I'm not wearing any of that sport equipment. It just phew, and I'm like, oh gosh, throw a
Yep.
towel.
Yep. And
So
like we had sessions where we had like two or three tubes behind the boat and like four or five people across those tubes. Like some of them were two or three person tubes. And we'd hit double ups. The drivers were, really good wakeboard drivers, so they knew what they were doing. And there was a time where we like two of the tubes hit double ups on either side of the wake, and people went flying. And one of the other boys ended up next to me in my tube, and then someone else transferred to his tube. Like it was a full mid-air tube transfer that just like randomly happened. It's
that is
it's
awesome.
wild, man.
It is definitely fun. Like I can see the thrill of what you do. I just have never really thought about doing it again. What needs to happen in your opinion for your sport to kind of get to that next level, especially with all the avenues for publicity that we have now?
It's tough, man. It's like all um, action sports are feeling it, and I think it's because access to being able to watch, you know, could be, like watching someone do a triple flip on a dirt bike. You can just type it in and watch it on screen. You don't have to go to an event to see it anymore. Or, like it's always a different experience. But access to be able to watch it has become so much easier that there's less of a need for people to go to the live events. And I also feel like wakeboarding has gone a little bit too PC with the events. Like they used to have like the Bud Light beer garden, where everyone go and drink, and they'd have like music and after parties and all. Like it was so much fun, and it's become too elitist. And I feel like the boat companies have a little bit to blame for that, because the boats have gone from being, in New Zealand dollars, which I think, let's say, I think 60,000 US dollars is about 100,000 New Zealand dollars. But like you used to be able to buy like one of the better boats out there for 80 to $100,000, maybe. You could buy a competitive boat that would allow you to train and be close to that level for 50 to $60,000. These days, you're spending between quarter and $500,000 to get the boat
Jeez.
that you need in order to be on the level with all the top guys. And a lot of the top guys, they get boat deals, they get boat sponsorships and stuff like that. And most of the time, you know that happens because their parents buy the first boat, then they get a sponsorship deal, and they just trade the boat in every year. So it's really hard to kind of crack that. There are some people that have, but yeah, I feel like that kind of it separated your average Joe that could afford to go out and ride and charge it, and they may be like maybe the people that bring a bit more character to the sport, whereas now it's just the kids that their parents can afford it, or they're that much of a talent they do get the support and they don't need to buy the boats. But um, yeah, there's a few things, and I think I really feel like, say for live events, it'd be great to combine it with like a country music festival if it's in Texas or Nashville or somewhere cool in the South, or just combine it with stuff to bring more people and more eyes to the sport, because it is such a fun sport. I think wake surfing and foiling as well has kind of shifted a little bit of attention over there, and most of the time it's the dad that's buying the boat, so he wants the wake surf boat. He's not out there trying to wakeboard. He's just wanting the cruisy wake surf on a Sunday afternoon. So yeah, there's a few factors, but I think the riding level is better than ever. The talent is incredible, but yeah, there are some really cool personalities in the sport, and I think that's one of my favorite things is just getting to know the people even from afar, even through social media, like where you're getting the stories that it's not just all the tricks they do on the water, it's the chaos and the partying and the traveling and the all the fun that goes along with it. I feel like more attention to that is what's going to get people more hyped on wakeboarding. Yeah, whether it's through podcasts or just content, but
We
yeah,
gotta
content games
maybe
changed everything as well. Sponsorship wise, if you create good content, you get more views. You don't necessarily have to be the best rider if you create the best content. So
maybe we get Netflix to do a wake thing like they did for the golf and Formula One and tennis. And
I get the feeling it'd be a little underwhelming, but yeah, it could be cool. Could be cool.
I mean, it's I don't know if it's like you said, it doesn't have to be just film on the water. It can be, again, if it was when you were there, it could be okay. He's deciding between a sandwich or training today. Like people are drawn to that connection. Like when a lot of athletes at the professional level, regardless of the attentions there or not, they're put on pedestals for one reason or another. We just do as a society. So selfishly, I guess, from a non-professional standpoint, it's nice to see that you guys are human as well. Not that we're rooting against you or there's no grudges, right? Like you've earned what you've earned, but that's just the human connectivity level. Is there a way to do that for your sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's definitely those stories to tell. And as I was saying, I think that's where people like myself are finding a lot of interest in just getting to know who these personalities are. Um, I I think one of the other issues with wakeboarding is that the risk versus reward side of things, like to be a Formula One driver or to be, obviously you're very limited the amount of people that can actually achieve that, or to NFL player or whatever it might be, any of the major sports, you're talking millions of dollars. Whereas, I don't know if I
Mm.
don't know if there'd be many wakeboarders who have earned enough to even be able to buy a boat, like $250,000 or
From
whatever it is. Like it's
competitions, from
from
competition.
competition, from sponsorship.
Okay.
There's a small handful of people that can make good money. There's another slightly bigger handful of people that can make okay money that they can get by on. But that's one of the things I think as well that maybe isn't bringing enough people into the sport is because there isn't the as big a reward that even in the past, like back in the golden era of wakeboarding was the late '90s, early 2000s. That was when there was big sponsorship, big brands, Mountain Dew and Bud Light and Ford and all these big name brands were um, sponsoring the sport and putting a lot of money in. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors along the way, but yeah, I think the people's stories, the personality and that stuff, I think is the most interesting that I find.
Yeah. Well, that's what we find interesting too. So I'm going to kind of direct it back towards you and your personality and your story. And again, like most things, I scroll through Instagram aimlessly when I'm bored, and I couldn't help but write down a quick quote from your one of your most recent reels. And again, I think it really highlights your personality now. And I guess we'll figure out if it's always been your personality. But you mentioned you were doing a speech at a school because that's one of the many hats you wear now as a keynote speaker. And you said, "Stop using me for your gratitude." What do you mean by this?
I mean, there was a little bit of tactic in that of it being somewhat of a clickbaity, grabby opener, and I guess it actually came from a conversation that I had a few weeks ago with a friend after a small, like 20 something minute TV documentary came out that I did on my story. And so she'd watched it. And, I often get messages like this where it's like, people have been inspired by my story, wherever they've found it. And sometimes they'll, even go on to say, I feel really grateful for what I have when I see what you're going through. And it's meant in the best way possible, and I even mentioned in that video, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because I love that I'm able to give that perspective for people to be able to find gratitude for something that they've always had, but suddenly they feel grateful for it. And when I say stop using me for your gratitude, it's more basically going, look, you don't need to compare against me to be grateful for what you have. Like, you can use it in that first instance to get that point of perspective. But that statement of, this is what I asked the kids at the school in the school assembly, and I basically just said, look, raise your hand if when you look at me and you hearing my story and you see me in my wheelchair, raise your hand if you feel grateful for your body and what it allows you to do every single day. Every hand went up, over 1,000 kids. And so the point that I make with that is that statement can stand on its own. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be compared to Brad, compared to anyone who's in a worse off situation than me. It's just, I am grateful for what my body allows me to do. And it's to be able to find that relationship with gratitude, I think is so powerful because you can be in any situation. And if you can be grateful for what you have, then you can find happiness regardless. Because, in this day and age, we're so led to believe that happiness comes from more, more money, more followers, cars, house, whatever, like that. Yes, it can lead to making life easier and allowing us to do things that we enjoy more. So, there's the old saying, it's like money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a boat. And boats are fun. And, so there is obviously that element to it. But there's a quote that I really like from a book called Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And the quote goes, the secret to happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. And that took me a little bit to figure out. I'm like, but we're talking, like, why is less? How can less mean more or happier? And it's more, it's in what we have control of, which is in our attitude and our effort and in our actions. And so if there's things that I'm unable to change, like right now, I can't change the fact that I was made redundant from my 20-hour a week job couple months ago. I can't change that right now. And, financial stress is a but there are things that I can control within that. And it's the way that I react and the way that I, move forward. And, yeah, I can apply for new jobs. I can, that's part of my attitude, part of the effort that I put in. So bringing it back to what we have control of. And I guess I stumbled across this because I felt like I thought my happiness was going to come back when I got my arm movements. I got my arms moving. I was like, that's my way to be happy again. And over 3 years of constant rehab, and I'd gotten no closer to moving my arms. That sent me to kind of the rock bottom depression moment that I found. Yeah, just over 3 years after the accident, and then that was kind of the turning point where I was like, I can't live like this. I can't continue living looking backwards and trying to get back to where I used to be and everything I used to have, and like the things have changed. The old way doesn't work anymore. And so I had to adjust the way that my attitude was, and start looking forward, going, what can I do? What am I grateful for? What do I have that, like what adventures can I still go on? Who's around me that can help me with this? Looking at the possibilities as opposed to the restrictions. and the limitations. And it was that switch, which I say it's a switch. It didn't happen like flicking a light switch. It took a lot of time and acceptance and kind of moving through the grief of losing the person that I used to be. Sorry, just losing an AirPod there. But yeah, it sort of forced me to adjust my mentality, and I was very lucky to have some help with that from a woman named Susie, she was a kinesiologist, and she was part of my life before the injury. She sort of ran a Pilates studio that I used to go to for strength and conditioning training, and we got along really well. And so she kind of stepped in after my accident, and she was there to help and with whatever she could do. And so she helped me with the mental battle and understanding acceptance, and that it's not about accepting everything that I believed my injury to be. It was, and what my future might be, and that no woman will ever love me, and I can never go on any adventure and never have fun anymore. And all these initial thoughts that I had, like I didn't have to accept those. Like that's not what acceptance is. It's accepting what is, which is just the here and now. I've broken my neck. I am paralyzed. It doesn't mean I'm going to be paralyzed forever. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. You know, there's only a certain amount of control I have over that, and that's the effort that I put into my rehab. But yeah, it was a battle, a journey, um, and I think writing my autobiography, which I chose to do myself, I was offered, a ghostwriter to help me with it, but I was like, look, there's not many things I can do myself anymore. I never thought I'd be an author, let alone on the bestseller list, but I'd give it a go, and it took me 6 years. I wrote almost 500,000 words, but yeah, ended up getting my book out, and it was just that helped me process it all, and like putting it all down on paper, and allowed me to kind of figure it all out. And so yeah, I think that was kind of my final step of pushing past acceptance into ownership, owning my situation, and that's the name of the book, Owning It, because that was empowering to me. Acceptance felt submissive. Well, okay, I guess I have to accept this, and whereas owning it, I'm like, no, I'm going to be the best fucking version of me that I can be. Like I'm going to do whatever I can that's still within my control to live the best life that I can. And so that was kind of the main turning point for me. And um, yeah, just having to navigate this new challenge. But yeah, I don't even remember what your initial question was, but I think
No, I love
hopefully
it.
I answered it.
Yeah, and then some, which is fantastic. It was the gratitude question and why we shouldn't
That's right.
compare, right? That's kind of the point of that quote. But I think,
Yeah, comparison cultures that
mm,
are rampant these days. Like it's so easy to look at someone's social media feed and go, "Oh, my life's shit," when they're probably sitting in a dark room posting their European holiday from a month ago. They're not living that
you're
right
gonna
now,
call
but
me
you
out
just
on the podcast
yeah.
like that.
But no, it's a lie. I get, like it's winter here in New Zealand. So many people have gone off for that. Even my mum and stepdad are over in Europe at the moment. So it's look, it's easy to feel like your life isn't good enough when you're scrolling through social media and looking at the Photoshop highlight reel of what everyone wants you to think their life is. And that's where I kind of wanted to be a bit more real with what I share, and a bit more open and a bit more vulnerable. And I've found a lot of strength in that vulnerability. So I think, yeah, finding gratitude and just ditching the comparison game. The old grass is greener on the other side thing. Like, doesn't matter what someone's grass is over the fence. Like, your grass is only going to get greener if you put effort into it. If you do the work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in your answer there was a couple of points that I want to hit before we kind of push forward in the episode. One was the acceptance versus the owning it. Do you think acceptance has to come before owning it, or is that something we can either
I think it
skip or
does.
speed up?
I think you can speed it up through understanding what it means properly. Like that's where I fell into the trap of believing it meant I had to accept all these things that wouldn't happen in the future, but that's future. Like we don't know what that's going to be. So I think, yeah, that understanding of that acceptance is purely accepting what is in the here and now. That helps speed
Should
it
we
up,
skip
but
it? I guess. Should we skip that acceptance?
I don't think so. I think it's a progression, and it's almost like I think the powerful thing with owning it, it's almost like if you think of it as owning a possession of some sort, like a car. If you own the car and there's something wrong with it, then you've got to put the work in and do something about it to improve it and to change it. If you don't own it, then like it's like almost if you've made a mistake in your life and if you don't own up to that mistake, even within yourself, you're not going to be able to learn from it. You're losing the opportunity to learn a valuable lesson from that. And so I think we need to accept the thing first. We need to receive it, take it on board, and find that kind of grounding point to then be able to push off the ground and own it. It's almost like an analogy could be, you're at the you know, bottom of the ocean, 10 meters deep or something. And if you've got your feet on the ground and you've really, you're in that sort of position on the bottom, you can push off and accelerate back up. I don't know if it's the best analogy, but just kind of, yeah, just kind of being in that situation where you really have found that true acceptance. And I've used this even in like dating scenarios where I've had to accept that, like, I understand that probably not as many women would be interested in me or dating someone in my situation than would want to go after a pro wakeboarder and the guy that I was before. I understand I'm, you know, I don't want to say the word limited there, but yeah, it's a different game now, and I think accepting that and accepting that rejection is going to be a big part of the dating scene for anyone. As soon as you accept that rejection is almost like guaranteed, or it's like you're going to get rejected, and if you don't, awesome, But if you go into it with the mentality, you're not afraid of being rejected if you've already accepted that it can happen. So that's where I had to accept that the game had changed, my life had changed, and that it's a different type of person that I've got to meet, and that a different person that would fall in love and be able to fall in love with someone and be with someone in my situation, because it's not easy. I wouldn't choose this for myself. When you end up in a relationship, you're somewhat choosing to share your life with that person, and so someone would have to choose the difficulties and the struggles that come along with who I am, and hopefully who I am, the stuff that I have control of is enough to outweigh that. And that's all I have control of. So that's where the ownership comes in. And I own that. And I'm like, fuck it, I can be the best person. Like confidence is really attractive. I find it attractive in women. Women find it attractive in men. And so for me to be able to be confident and know my worth, know that I'm worthy of love, but understand that not everyone has the capability of um, being able to be with someone in my situation, that allows me to accept rejection without being hurt by it, and allows me to be able to push forward and know that I'm still worthy of love, and that I will come across someone, and it'll happen when it's meant to. And yeah, I think it's just that's something that's really helped when it comes to that acceptance and ownership. It allows you to be grounded and not be in this space of like, I'm still just as like I should have just as many women coming at me as I did before. Like that's just the delusion, and we have to accept and be grounded and accept what is. Sometimes there's some hard truths in that. And so by accepting that, then we can then move forward.
Yeah, what a lovely perspective. And I think that plays right into the theme perspective, right? Once you have the view of acceptance, have the view of ownership, you do all of a sudden start to have this sense of fear, just about anything, right? Like kind of what you were saying, like, oh, I'm afraid not many as many people will come after me. But you've done the work and you're currently doing the work. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it goes away. It doesn't for anybody. When you come face to face with fear and you feel like you're juggling your confidence, you feel like you're juggling what you can own and all these things, how do you, I'm not going to say ignore fear because I think a healthy amount of fear is important, but how do you confront fear and remind yourself that you are still worthy, even though your situation has changed?
Um, I think it's again going back to what you have control of and what you don't. You know, like I said, something you may have seen on my story is that occasionally I'll go freediving. You know, I
I wouldn't even
started
do that now.
practicing.
So
I
hats
started
off. Holy
practicing
crap.
holding my breath, and I've done a dive into a vertical entry cave where I sat 36 feet down for over 3 minutes, somewhat on my own. I had a safety diver down there watching, but I was sitting in this beautiful beam of light in the bottom of this cave, holding my breath, unable to swim. Like
Mm.
I'm completely reliant on the people around me and, you know, the signals that we've come up with and them, you know, everyone communicating well and, you know, having that trust there. But that's where, like, I've even done, you know, done a few dives out in the ocean, and I really want to be sitting on the bottom of the ocean and see a shark swim by because I love the idea of confronting that fear and knowing that in that situation, all I have control of is how calm I remain. If I start to panic, then I lose oxygen and then I could drown, you know, before the shark swims by and someone comes and gets me or whatever the situation is. If the shark wants to eat me, it's going to eat me. Fucking nothing I can do about it in that situation. So it's just that acceptance of what is, you know, like I could get rejected going up and approaching someone, asking them out, you know, but without risk, there is, you know, very often no reward. Like you've got to risk it in order um, to find that reward, you know, and it's just something that I guess I've cemented that in and just going, okay, well, this is all I have control of, and if she says no, all good, you know, she's clearly not the one for me. Like it's just that kind of a bit more like matter of fact, a bit more logic, a bit more kind of, you know, doesn't matter. Like if there's someone I'm attracted to, cool, there's that attraction there. But if it's not reciprocated, if they're not interested, there's 0 point investing any emotion or any more of that time into that. And I guess I gotten to that point where I've got a good understanding of, you know, is there much point in investing my energy into something that I don't have control of, and really being able to evaluate that and identify what's in my control, what's not, what's worth putting my energy into, what's not, and yeah, I think that's kind of a big part of what I wanted to share in my book as well, and I wanted people to learn from, and um, you know, because obviously I've learned all of this because I've gone through such a tough, traumatic experience. But I would love for people to be able to learn some of what I've learned without going through what I've been through.
Yeah. Before I jump into the next question, I just want you to realize that I know, especially as an athlete myself, when you stop, you lose some of that athletic identity, right? Like it's what you've done for so long. In your case, it's your career, but your innate need or whatever's in you to push the limits, to want to sit next to a shark, that better be on video so we can see that because my goodness, I barely swim to the bottom of a pool, Brad. I'm not a water person. I'll go to the beach, I'll sit there, I'll swim for a little bit, but my goodness, I just want you to know that I'm proud and happy to see that you didn't at least lose that piece of you, right? When your sport was taken away, you still found a way to fuel that part of your identity. In a pragmatic approach, right? Like you said during the
Progression was kind of what I felt like I was missing, and it was because that was what my life was in wakeboarding. It was about pushing, you know, getting better and better, and trying to be better every day. And even with my rehab, I wasn't progressing. I felt like I was going nowhere, and my life was feeling really stagnant. So yeah, it was purely. I mean, that was where the breath hold stuff came in. I was just like, cool, here's something I have good control of, and my body's actually more oxygen efficient than any able-bodied person because I'm not using my muscles. So the oxygen can be used more efficiently for me. So that's again like leaning into owning it. Like that's I wouldn't have that without the injury. It's a benefit that I've got from it. So yeah, it's just I guess in my nature to want to progress and push myself and show people that you can do things after injury. Life doesn't have to immediately stop. Life changes, and going back to sort of what you started the question off with, which was about coming down from the top of the mountain as an athlete, and that's where I was even hired to speak to the New Zealand Olympic team after the Olympics a few years ago. Just sort of that bringing them down off that high and allowing them to, or, trying to teach them ways to, maybe it was their last Olympics for some of them. And it's a hard thing to go through and you lose that identity. And, um, yeah, that was just a big learning that I had to go through. And I like to be able to sort of help others through that if I can. Um, and yeah, I guess it's one of those things we attach our identity to what we do. And, uh, when you lose that, you feel like you've lost yourself. And so that's where, um, yeah, I sort of felt like I was left with this kind of big question mark over my head and figuring out who is Brad now without wakeboarding. And that's a journey in itself, which is tough. But that's the thing. If you feel you're only meant for one purpose or one thing, and that was your sport, you're closing so many doors, or locking those doors, not allowing them to open. Um, but even the way I stumbled across freediving was I wanted to go scuba diving, and the scuba dive doctor told me no. Like there is a medical risk, nitrogen bubbles forming on the scar tissue in your spinal cord, and blah blah blah. I don't know how much of a medical risk that is because I've seen other people with spinal cord injuries go scuba diving before. But in order to go to this dive school, they wouldn't let me do it because the dive doctor said no. So I was like, wait, if that medical risk comes from breathing compressed gas underwater, if I hold my breath, then that eliminates that, right? And obviously the doctor was like, yeah, but you can't swim. And I'm like, well,
You're like,
let me
watch
figure
me.
that out. I'll figure that thing out, that part. But yeah, and so that's where I stumbled into it when I was so dead set on going scuba diving. Like that was the door that I wanted to open and it got slammed in my face. But I didn't realize that like the amount of extra that I got from freediving, like the amount it brought to my life was so much more than I would have got from scuba diving because I had to push myself. I had to, it's about progression and pushing the limits and control and, that breath hold control. And, so yeah, had I been so just pig-headed and only focused on scuba diving and taken the no that I was given, then I would have missed out on this opportunity. So when I think it's about, let's say you want to be an NFL player, like sure, you might become an NFL player. I don't know what the average shelf life of an NFL player is. It's probably only a couple of years. Um, for some, it might be a bit longer, but what are you going to do after that? And if you're closed off to every opportunity along the way, then you're limiting yourself. You might get into broadcasting, you might get into coaching, you might get into other things within the sport that you love that then you can continue to do after you're no longer a professional. And people limit themselves. And so I think it's important to pick up those opportunities along the way. That's why I picked up commentating. I became one of the announcers on the Pro Wakeboard Tour because I couldn't afford I couldn't afford my entry fee. And when I got injured, I wanted to remain a part of the sport. So I picked up the microphone and started commentating New Zealand events. And the next thing I'm offered a spot commentating the Pro Tour, which I could still compete in. They covered my entry fee and accommodation. And it actually helped my performance because I'm no longer stressed about if I don't make the top 10, how much money am I losing this weekend? I was always going to walk away breaking even now because I'd taken on this new opportunity and it was it's even a benefit to my sponsors and gets me in front of the people there more and it's better for my profile if I'd have only been focused on trying to be the best wakeboarder, I would have missed that. So yeah, and like I even last year got flown across to Australia and got to host the World Wakeboard Champs again after 10 years. So yeah, that's a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, how do we know when to take those blinders off and go for those extra opportunities versus when to stay focused on our dream?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you don't, in order to be successful at something, you don't have to only be purely solely focused on that one thing. I feel like there are little things you can pick up along the way, and it could be like what I said when you're injured. You can't be training, you can't be doing what you need to be doing. So try something new, see what opportunities there are. Um, yeah, I think it's something that we just need to be open to, and yeah, go for that big North Star dream. Go for that thing that you want to achieve, but just be conscious along the way of what opportunities there might be that you can learn something, and could be the way that you stay involved in your sport afterwards or in whatever it is that you do.
Yeah. Before our final question here, I'll ask you a final question. I don't know how I would word that. Before the end of the show here, I'll ask you one last question before the last question. How was that? Second to last
Cool.
question. That was a
Yep,
struggle
yep,
to come up with that one, but we pushed through.
you
Um,
got there.
in the short time we've had to kind of chat here, and again from following your story for the past couple of weeks, honestly, a couple of months here, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot that scares you. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's fair to assume, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask, what scares you? Like, what are you afraid of now that you've gone through what some people would be considered the worst?
I mean, where I'm at right now might be slightly different to a few years ago where I wrote in my book where I was talking about like I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of I've lived an amazing life. Um, that's where like I'm not afraid to take risks because there is probably a greater risk that I'd end up dying from an infection in hospital. That's how a lot of people in my situation end up going, and so it's from like, why wouldn't I go freediving and have these amazing experiences just because there's also a risk there? I think, yeah. So it was more. So I didn't fear death. I feared a life without color, without adventure, without passion, without essence, like without just that thing that and a lot of it I've found, when it is adventure or, knowing that I can jump in my off-road chair and go to the beach or go on a hike with my dog or, just go and do some fun stuff, even go freediving. I think now, I don't know, maybe one of my sort of bigger fears that I let in more often than others would be around loneliness, or around, like, am I going to actually find someone who will want to be with me in my situation? And, you got to hold confidence in that and kind of believe that it's going to happen. But that's the one that I let in more often than others. Um, I think, yeah, I try not to give into fear. And I feel like quite often everything, every action, every decision, everything we do either goes back to love or fear. The kind of the main drivers behind our decision making. So I try my best to make decisions and drive my life from a point of love and doing things from that perspective as opposed to fear. That's where hatred, that's where racism, that's where all these things come in. It's fear and the unknown, things that we don't know, and think that, oh, if we let too many of these people in, then we're going to get overrun and yada yada. Or like this, I don't know, too many examples to go down with that. I think just um, yeah, coming from a place of love, I think, is what allows me to limit the amount of fear that I let in. But yeah, I mean, even shit like, because I've got a dog who's a year and a half old now, and he's my everything at the moment, and like, and it's he may live to 12 or 14 or whatever, wherever he's going to end up to, and occasionally I'll already let that in, let that feeling of fuck, 10 years, 12 years from now, like losing this is the biggest part of my life now, is a scary feeling. So yeah, but that's very future orientated. I think if you're living in the present, it's very hard to be fearful. We're more often fearful living outside of the present, projecting forward, and more so we're end up depressed if we spend too much time dwelling on the past. So that remaining in the present and doing what we can today, here, now, not worrying about things outside of our control, that's what allows me to not live from a place of fear.
Yeah, beautiful. Letting love win is kind of your thing. Just living from that place, like you said, accepting where you're at, controlling what you can, holding your breath for 3 damn minutes. I don't know how to do that, but maybe we'll get there.
Five
Maybe that's
minutes,
my new
45
challenge.
seconds
But
is my
uh,
record.
that's it's got to be close. What's the world record? Do we know? Are we
I,
chasing that?
I really want to hit 6 minutes. The You know how they got the advanced games coming out, like the Olympic Games on
Yeah.
steroids? So the version of that in freediving where people are like more or less cheating. They're, perfect temperature water, they're breathing oxygen, straight oxygen beforehand. They might even take medication to slow their heart rate. Like I'm pretty sure the record is longer than an episode of Friends, like 23 minutes or something stupid. I think even
How do you not fall
David
asleep
Blaine or
down
whatever
there?
his name is. Yeah,
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
David
That's
Blaine. Yeah,
because
that makes sense.
in order to hold your breath that long and stay calm, you've got to almost get into a sleep state. Like that's where you got to be real. Like that's how I meditate. That's the only way I can get into a meditative state is to be underwater holding my breath. It just eliminates so much thought and noise in my mind. But yeah, I think the world records, the natural world record would be around 12 minutes, 12 or 13. The New Zealand record, I think, is maybe like 9 minutes or something like that.
You're right
Yeah,
there.
I
You're
thought
right
about
there.
whether I would push for that. I don't know if we'll see how I go. Once I hit 6 minutes, we'll see where I go from there. But I just want to be able to hang out down there long enough to have a cool experience, come up, take some breaths, go back down.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
watch my
incredible.
friend do some spearfishing or collect a crayfish and then come back and get me. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Huh. Who knows? Maybe you'll catch one. That's not out of the question. We'll figure out a way for that.
never know.
You're just there. He comes so close to, you, and you're like, "Gotcha." But yeah, we do really appreciate your time, your openness, your just honesty around your situation, and really wanting the best for others, but still accepting that you deserve the best as well. I think so many times we do compare and we do say like, "Oh, we just negative self-talk ourself off the face of the earth," and it's a hard place to get out of. It's a hard place to be in, but I think, and again, if you have the means, I think you should check out Brad's book so you can learn more about him. But I'm sure it's detailed in there. But from this conversation, it's like if you can start to understand that you are worthy no matter your current state, there is so much to love about yourself and others. Again, no matter your current state, it's those small steps forward that really can lead you down what you consider to be a happy life, right? For some people, it is those big cars and houses. For other people, it's being underwater for whatever 6 minutes. For me, it's doing this and sharing conversations with really impressive and incredible people. So again, we want to thank you so much for sharing an hour with us. I mean, that's incredible in itself that you would take that time again halfway across the world to do that and really own that place of love that you exist in. So if
My
people have
pleasure.
felt connected to your story and what you've been talking about, would you be able to share with us where we can find you and maybe where they can learn a little bit more about you and connect if they feel so called?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the book, which you should be able to get on Amazon and stuff like that. Again, it's called Owning It, and but yeah, outside of that, I mean, there are other podcast interviews. There's documentaries and video and stuff on YouTube if you're interested in the wakeboarding side of things or the post-injury stuff. You can find me on there. Just search my name, and then same on social media. Just Brad Smeele, all one word, um, across all the different platforms. So yeah, and if you feel like it, flick me a message if you got any questions, or if you're in a, stuck in a tight spot and you want to have someone who, might be able to shed some insight or just, yeah, help you kind of navigate it. Then that's for me, that's kind of part of my purpose, right? It's giving back and helping others. And I think that's something that I've found that the more you give, the more you receive. Um, and I've really enjoyed that part of the journey. So yeah, um, don't be a stranger. Reach out, and yeah, hope you enjoy some of the content that I spit out. Sometimes it still can be a little controversial, a little like in your face to start with, but there's generally a good message behind what I'm sharing. So yeah, I hope it
Yeah.
stinks in.
Well, thank you very much. We do have one final question we ask every single guest that comes on the podcast. I don't know if you've heard it or not. I always preface it saying it's the scariest question you'll ever receive, and I think all the guests kind of get a little out of breath there, but clearly you won't. So, are you ready for the final question here, Brad, on your
Yeah,
episode of the Make Mental podcast?
give it to me.
If there is one person in the entire world at this exact moment who needs a hug from you, who would you give it to and why?
It's a tough one. Um, my dad is one. He's got Parkinson's disease, and he's been through it. He's one of my biggest inspirations, man. Like seeing what he's been through. I wish I could give him a big hug. Uh, in terms of me being able to wrap my arms around someone, like having that ability, I wish I could do that. Like my dad. I've got yeah, a couple of other like close friends. One an ex-girlfriend who I'm just still really close with. And yeah, always just we're she's the type of person that I can always talk to. She feels like she can always talk to me. We always send each other virtual hugs and things like that. So yeah, I think there's a couple of people, but yeah, I think my dad would probably be the main one.
A nice little group hug. We've had those before. So, if
Yeah.
you're feeling like you're the person who needs the hug from Brad, then you're probably right, and you're included in this group hug.
I'll send you an emoji hug like all day, just
That is
if you
awesome.
need it. I don't know if that really helps, but
No, just to be thought about means more than you know to some people. So that's the point behind that question. And whenever this episode comes out, we hope that emoji hits them hard. So we appreciate your time, Brad. And again, thank you so much for opening up, excuse me, and really letting us inside your world here for the last hour.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.